Hello and welcome back to the Karma Stories podcast. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today I have 4 stories for you from the Malicious Compliance subreddit. The Karma Stories podcast is published to all major podcasting platforms, and you can also read along on YouTube under our @Karma Stories podcast handle. Alright, on to the stories, let's jump right in. This story comes to us from DT20. You want me to work 0 overtime? Sure thing, boss. Some context. I work as a manager in a call center. I am nowhere near the phones and generally do not interact with customers. Rather, I am a knowledge repository for my staff and handle communication between our team and the client company, which we provide support for. We are a technical support team, not a sales or order support, and the devices which we support are very complex consumer electronics. Most of our support time goes to professional installers, and we rarely speak with customers firsthand. In short, my job is to know our policies like the back of my hand, and to know the products we support better than anyone except the designers that engineered them. A secondary part of my job is to coordinate our online chat team, which is generally pretty hands-off other than right as the shift ends, when I generally jump in to monitor any active chats and make sure they close up quickly. I don't want to keep my guys here any longer than necessary. They like it better, and it cuts down on overtime hours for the entire line of business by a lot. This means I generally rack up 15 to 20 minutes of overtime a day, though some days it can be as little as 0 and others as much as an hour. My direct boss knows all about this and is generally all for it. One day, however, the guy who was in charge of all the support teams, we work with many brands, sent out a memo that management should never be getting overtime. I brought this up with my boss, as this would seriously impact my team, who arranged a meeting with the big boss. Big boss proceeds to tell my boss that no, I cannot rack up any overtime hours. Fine, I get out at a reasonable time every day. I have 0 issue with this. So the next Monday, I log out right when my shift ends. Turns out 3 of my guys were there for an extra hour with last-minute chats. Tuesday, nearly the same story. This continues all through the week. We are bleeding overtime hours for support staff, with most of my team getting nearly an hour of overtime per day. This goes on for a pay period when Big Boss comes back and tells us we were told to reduce overtime hours and that we had somehow racked up even more than we had before. My boss backed me up and told the big boss that no, we were told to reduce management OT hours, and that I had indeed not racked up any overtime. Big boss asks why OT hours increased, and I mentioned I stayed to make sure my team had support they needed to get out as early as possible. Big boss goes, well, that makes sense, keep doing that, but add any overtime to your Friday lunch so you don't rack up overtime. I explained that I can do this, but will still probably get a bit of overtime on Fridays since the end of shift is obviously after lunch. Again, cool, long lunches are nice. This works well for a few weeks. I am making sure I zero out my OT, but I knew it was only a matter of time before they regretted doing any of this. We were approaching the busy season and getting more and more long chats and calls. I made sure to get Big Boss to email and CC me and my boss this instruction directly. Sure enough, a few weeks later, Monday, I'm there for a whopping hour and 30 minutes trying to get one guy out the door. Tuesday for an hour, Wednesday for an hour 15, and to top it off, 2 whole hours on Thursday. It was a terrible week for the last-minute chats. I tally up my makeup time for my lunch, 5 hours and 45 minutes, plus an hour for my normal lunch. I normally worked 4 hours, 1 hour lunch, then another 4 hours. So that Friday, I came in and explained the situation to my boss. He was cool with me working for only 2 hours and 15 minutes the whole day, because I was doing exactly what the big boss said to do. So an hour into my shift, I go on my 6 hour and 45 minute lunch. While I'm enjoying my most of day siesta, the entire line of business is burning down. Chat is so busy, we have people waiting 30 minutes to speak with someone. Calls are so busy, we have 15 calls waiting. On days like this, I normally jump in the queues as I do not need to document every case like our tier 1s have to, and I'm very good at my job. I can usually knock out a 15 to 20 minute call for a tier 1 in 5 minutes or less. I can easily handle 4 to 5 chats at one time, seriously taking a load off that team. Now, I alone could not save this shift, no way. We were due for a hiring class, and we're working on onboarding new tier 1s at that time. But man, does it look bad to the client when one of your key players is absent all but 2 hours and 15 minutes of one of the busiest days ever for our line of business. I get back in, settled down at my desk right as the rush is clearing up. The damage was already done, and we were manageable for the rest of the day. Right at the end of my shift, I look and notice that there is no one on a chat and no queue. So I immediately log out and thank my team for working hard that day. Then Monday comes. I get to meet with the client, big boss, and my boss for our weekly meeting. The client is furious about how on Friday, one of our best assets was on a super long lunch break, and Big Boss put me on the spot and asks why that was. My response was rehearsed. According to company policy established and agreed upon on date we met with the Big Boss, I am not to accrue overtime hours. Any hours over 8 worked within the work week must be made up during my lunch break on Fridays. Big Boss began denying it when my boss stepped in and was like, wait, I got an email about this. He pulls up the email Big Boss sent and shares it on screen in the meeting. Client is pissed and the corporate rep begins ripping Big Boss a new one on the phone. After ripping into Big Boss, the corporate rep speaks to me, telling me to accrue as many hours as needed to make sure my job is done, and that if my company wants to retain this line of business, Big Boss is not to interfere with my generally very successful management without consulting them and myself. Since then, Big Boss has continued to try to interfere and change how I run my line. However, every time so far, the corporate rep has had my back. They are extremely happy with my work and know I do a great job. Heck, they even pushed through a large raise for me when Big Boss was blocking my boss's attempts to get me more money. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Throwaway47138. It says, you are taking money out of Big Boss's bonus checks, and that's why he's trying to kill your overtime. But I'm guessing that the client knows this too, and will make sure Big Boss doesn't get it one way or another, after how badly he screwed things up. OP followed every single rule, got them to send it to them in writing, and the boss backed them up as well as the client as well. This went absolutely perfectly for OP. They even came out of it in the end with a raise. I mean, come on. OP, are you offering any kind of classes on how to stick it to the bosses? Cause I'd like to sign up. This story comes to us from Cat on Duty. Boss pays a lot for his fancy plans. This story happened around 15 years ago. I had just quit my BA in economics, it just wasn't right for me, and quickly needed a job while figuring out what to do while paying my bills. I found one in a call center. This center was a subcontractor for big companies. In my case, it was the second biggest telco company in the country, and they partially outsourced first and second level support for DTV, internet, and phone services to the company I worked for. The job was okay, not very demanding, hilarious interactions with customers, and nice coworkers. But I soon discovered that management was just a bunch of inflated egos with glorious ideas, but no talent. So after about a year, I was promoted to supervisor. Just a flashy title for solving crappy cases, no pay raise or other benefits. Apparently, I did a good job because 3 months later, I got called into the office by the management team. Their plan was to form a training team, and they wanted me to lead it. At that point, I still didn't know what I wanted to do with my career, so I just said yes. And that's when the crap show started. They gave me a contract with no detailed job description, a fixed salary plus a monthly bonus, which I can get by achieving certain milestones every month. When I asked what those milestones are, They just said they will define them every month. Okay, fine by me. As an employee with a fixed salary, I also had to report my hours every month to my assigned manager. Let's call him Frederick. So here we go. As I said before, they had lots of fancy ideas, but no clue. I asked countless times what their plan was with that training department, what my tasks were, what my milestones are, and I only got some wishy-washy speech about some grand ideas. In the end, I was tasked with all sorts of nonsense, helping out with calls, best paid call center agent ever, designing signs for the center, where to find the toilet, for example, and stuff like that. They actually gave me so much nonsense work that I had to work overtime. But fine, I just do it, submit my report at the end of the month, and figure out my life. There was just one thing that really pissed me off: the bonus. After the first payment, I noticed the bonus was missing, so I asked Frederick why. He said that we never defined the milestones, so I did not reach them. I am not stupid and I know my rights. Fact is, he has to give me the milestones. If he does not, then there are none, and I am entitled to the bonus regardless. I could have made a fuss about it right then and there, but I decided to be quiet and just go with his nonsense. But I made sure to forward every important email about my role, salary, and bonus to my private email. So this went on for about 6 to 7 months until I had a pretty big accident, which kept me in the hospital for 2 weeks, and then at home for another 6 weeks. The company had a habit of firing people after such a long absence, which is illegal but hard to prove. So I knew that the moment I came back, I would be fired. Sure enough, the day came, and as soon as I walked through the door with my pretty sign on it, I saw Frederick and the HR lady marching towards me. They escorted me into an office and told me I was fired immediately because they decided to close the training department that never really existed in the first place. In my country, the notice period for both parties is usually 3 months, but it is possible to let someone go effective immediately. That means I still get 3 months' pay, but I'm not allowed to work there anymore. I happily signed the notice and they let me go to my office to pack up. Little did they know that I just went to prepare my farewell gift to them. I had already printed out everything, calculated my overtime and the missing bonuses. So 30 minutes later, I called the HR lady into the office and laid it all out. Due to the fact that they let me go immediately, they had to pay me the overtime plus a surcharge, and of course, all of the bonuses plus 3 months' salary. All in all, it added up to over $15,000. The only thing the HR lady said was, "We didn't expect you to know the laws." I guess that was a slip-up. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Zero Ingenuity. It says, "We didn't expect you to know the laws is a full-blown admission of intentional criminal conduct. Tip off the Labor Department about them anyway, or rather, others in such a situation should, because for darn sure, if they'll break the law and casually admit it, they're breaking other laws too." OP responded to this one and said, "All the stuff they did was in a gray area. If I had to record her, I could have gone to court, but it cost me a lot in a lawyer and court fees with no guarantees that I get any money back. They had a habit of firing people after sick leave, but if they gave an excuse, like department is getting closed or not enough work, you have close to 0% chance to win a case. We do not have the kind of unions or labor department here. That's why it's important to know your rights and the law, and trick these shady companies." It's too bad that OP wasn't able to go after this company because you know they're gonna scam everybody else there that they're able to as time goes on. If nobody ever holds a company accountable, then it just continues the same way, and so many more people get screwed. This story comes to us from Dullahan8. "I just want an invoice, please. I've been working trying to port a childhood landline telephone number to VoIP. This would involve a 3-step process: porting from landline to mobile, changing ownership from my dad to myself, then porting the number to a VoIP ISP. The VoIP company I want to port to requires an invoice with my name, my account number, and my phone number as proof to initiate the port. I have actually spent 4 months already trying to convert the landline number to mobile and have become extremely frustrated navigating ISP bureaucracy shenanigans. But that is a story for another time. This story begins with me calling into my mobile carrier after the ownership change. As soon as customer service picked up and I identified myself, they started going on a sales pitch for a very cheap prepaid offer, which I shot down right away. I politely declined the offer and explained that I was calling just to obtain an invoice to initiate a port to another ISP. Thankfully, they backed off right away, but said that they will not be able to provide an invoice. I asked why, and they said that they never provide invoices for pay-as-you-go plans. I chose this plan because it was their cheapest plan to maintain, as I did not plan to stay here long. I called them out because my dad had been receiving invoices when he was the owner of the account. They denied this and said they never did and never will provide invoices for pay-as-you-go accounts. They explained, furthermore, phone ports do not require proof of invoice as there is already strict security in place for number porting. We spent 20 minutes going back and forth about this, with me explaining how their company's operating procedures do not necessarily apply to other companies. I am thoroughly agitated at this point because our conversation has gone nowhere and I have not been able to achieve any of my goals. I stopped talking to give myself a moment to step back from the situation, and then a light bulb moment hit me. Cue malicious compliance. I asked, "So explain to me again, how much does that prepaid offer cost again?" To which they joyfully repeated the terms and conditions of the offer. "And will I be invoiced for this plan you are offering?" A moment of silence on the line as customer service realizes what I'm doing. "Yes," they replied quietly. "Alright," I said confidently, "let's swap over to the new plan. Then you can send me an invoice." So now my account is being converted to a cheaper prepaid plan. I'll get my invoice and finally get my number ported to VoIP. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Google Mail. It says, "This is odd, really. An invoice is a request in advance for payment of a specific sum, payable by a specific date. It is not a receipt for payment. A pay-go phone company literally cannot issue an invoice as they have no idea what you will spend or what date. That is literally the whole point of pay-go. They weren't being awkward or bureaucratic. You were literally just asking them to do something that cannot exist. By converting to a pay-in-advance contract, of course, they can issue an invoice, as they know exactly what amount you will owe them and on what date. The issue here you haven't mentioned is that the new contract you signed almost certainly has a time period attached to it. Very few will let you just cancel at any point beyond the cooldown period of a few days. As such, you may now be committed to them for much longer than you expected, which would prevent you from moving it to VoIP with another company. I guess it really depends on what the contract terms are. My mother has a pay-as-you-go phone, and she's contracted to pay a certain amount onto it every month. I think it's only like $20 or $25, something like that. But because it's pay-go, it's still month to month, and she can cancel anytime. Also, they do email her an invoice for that payment every month. So while the commenter is correct that most pay-gos would not send out an invoice, some of them definitely do. This story comes to us from Great Palpatine. Removal of a table in my big boss's office. When I was in the military, I worked in an office. This office has several rooms. My superior and his superior, Big Boss, work in the same room, but I work in a room several doors down. For context, Big Boss had a certain way of doing things, which was admittedly a little weird sometimes, but he really hated it when people changed the way he did things. I always knew this, and so I always just left Big Boss to his own devices. The easiest way to make Big Boss happy was to literally just give him what he wanted, doing the most unimportant and minor things just the way he liked it. But that's a story for another day. Now, Superior and Big Boss often have differing ideas and different ways of doing things, and Superior really doesn't like it when I contradict him. For context, A few months before this incident, we had just had quite a major structural adjustment in preparation for a large military operation. Superior wanted to lay things out a certain way. I disagreed. My disagreement made my superior very angry because I should not be questioning him, and he told me not to question his judgment of how things should be laid out in our office again. One day, Superior asks me to move the table out of the room when Big Boss wasn't in. The malicious compliance. Are you sure Big Boss would like this? Just do it and stop asking so many questions. Okay then. I moved the table out of Big Boss's office. Cue several hours later. Who moved this table out of my office? Big Boss's voice can be heard several doors down. The dressing down could be heard several doors away. Big Boss could be heard going off on my superior for several minutes. After that incident, my superior gave me less of that just do it attitude until I left the military. Okay, I have a question. Is it actually malicious compliance or just compliance in this case? This is military. You followed a direct order from a superior. I see that as compliance and not really malicious at all. But I'd love to know what you all think, so if you're listening on YouTube, comment down below and let me know if you think that last one was malicious compliance. If you enjoy daily Reddit stories, I encourage you to follow and add us to your favorites on whichever podcasting platform you enjoy the most. Also, if you're watching and listening on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button and drop a like on the video. It really helps us out. I thank you for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.